Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in about 5 minutes. Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Hello, Wilma. It's Ellen Sullivan.
I'm muted. Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started in just a minute or two. Still got quite a few people coming in, but I don't want to wait too long to start. Okay, we've got a fair number of people. What do you think, Christy? Should I start?
I have it's just at 4 o'clock.
Okay, I'll wait a few minutes. Thanks for being
like
patient.
4:02. How about
Okay.
that?
Welcome, everyone. Before we get started, a couple of things. If you want to, I know that we had a lot of people reply from all over the world, basically. So if you want to write in the chat where you're viewing this from, that would be fun to take a look at where everybody is right now. I'm in New England and we have about a foot of snow on the ground, but it's a nice sunny day here. So it's a good afternoon to do a presentation. And just want to remind everyone, we are recording this afternoon. So if you could please turn your cameras off, that would be helpful. Thank you. And your microphones. I'm going to wait one more minute and then I'll get started. Okay. All right. Welcome. My name is Debbie Merriam, and I'm the Arboretum Director at the Mary May Binney Wakefield Arboretum in Milton, Massachusetts. But I'm very excited to do this presentation today because I am also the American Conifer Society Reference Garden Chair. So it's great to be doing these programs when we can't get out to see some of these gardens, but our focus is 5 new or almost new reference gardens in the Northeast region. And this is the first presentation of 5. So if you enjoy this presentation and you want to see others, if you haven't already signed up, if you go to the American Conifer Society website and go to the events page, you can sign up that way. So I hope you will do that and you can experience some amazing gardens that are in our region. We're also doing a grafting presentation and it's almost sold out. So if you're interested in doing that, that is also on the events page. And that's with Ted Hildebrandt. So I think that is on Saturday. So let's start here. So I just wanted to point out before I get started talking about the Mary May Binney Wakefield Arboretum, even though there's a pandemic, and because I'm the reference garden chair, I had the opportunity to go see 2 of our new reference gardens, one in Villanova, Pennsylvania, which is the Stone Lay Garden, and that's up on top. And I got to go with our regional president, Mike Larkin, and our treasurer, Hiram Munger, and actually present the reference garden plaque to Ethan Kaufman, the director there. And it's an Olmsted design landscape, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And it is going to be on the 2022 national tour for the American Conifer Society. So hopefully that event will happen, but if it does, I hope you all can join us. And then in the photo below, we presented to the Temple Ambler Arboretum. And they have a stunning conifer collection as well. And that Arboretum will be on the tour in 2022. And both of these Arboretums are doing a presentation as part of this Northeast region conifer virtual Zoom tour. So you can check that out on the Conifer Society page. But with that, I'll get started. So Mary May Binney Wakefield passed away in 2004, and fondly known as Polly, so I'll refer to her as Polly going forward. And she was the last member of, a last member of 10 generations of one family living on the property in Milton, Massachusetts. So we are located about 10 miles south of Boston in Milton. Let me see where the arrow is, between two very big green spaces. One is the Neponset River watershed, and that's to the left of the arrow, and the other is the Blue Hills Reservation. And it makes up about 7,000 acres of green space, of which we lie right between both. So you can see here in this image where my arrow is, this is where the Arboretum is, and then this massive swath of green space, both above us and below us, and then surrounded more densely by larger communities. But it's one of the largest areas of green space next to an urban center. So I mentioned that Polly Wakefield was the last surviving member of 10 generations of one family. And this is a picture of her as a young girl with her favorite stuffed fox, which we still have, and her parents and her grandparents, and her aunt and uncle. So the family started on the property in 1700, and they built this. This is the original farmhouse that was built in 1710, and we use it as our offices today. And it's a beautiful example of architecture from early America. But ultimately, the family made a lot of money in the Asia trade. They had an office on Long Wharf, and they built this Georgian-style mansion, and this became the country estate of their family. So Polly Wakefield attended the Lothrop School of Landscape Architecture for Women. It was in Groton, Massachusetts, and it was a highly regarded program, and it attracted many great architects and teachers to give classes there. It ultimately closed during World War II, but many of the programs were rolled into the MIT School of Architecture. And Polly graduated there in 1939, and she was an excellent illustrator, and she was also very good at using plant material in a way that had not been really thought about previous to the work that she did. She was very interested in naturalistic approach, but she was also interested in using a lot of species that were not native to the United States. So this is her thesis focused on the farmhouse that I showed you earlier and creating gardens around that. But those gardens were actually never realized, and that is because she started taking propagation courses at the Arnold Arboretum in 1940. And she continued taking propagation courses there for 40 years. And she ended up propagating the majority of plants that we have at the Wakefield today. She also took a lot of classes in horticulture, focused on the collections at the Arboretum. And as many of you may know, a lot of those collections came from different parts of the world. So those species are also reflected in our collection as well. But then she also developed an interest in conifers, particularly dwarf conifers. This is Polly in the middle. She's always wore her hat and her blue suit, her famous blue suit. And she's taking a tour of the newly installed reference garden with Donald Wyman, who was the director of the Arboretum the Arnold Arboretum for a long time. And she gained quite a bit of interest in understanding how these dwarf conifers could be propagated. Polly never ended up practicing professionally. What happened was it was World War II. Her brother was in Europe fighting, and her father became quite ill. So she ended up staying at home and managing the estate. Now, this is an image of the farmhouse. The Georgian mansion. And the Georgian mansion was pretty much surrounded by farm fields. So she took it upon herself to use the family's property as her her canvas to create her ideal collection of plants and what that would look like here. So here's an aerial image, and this image was taken in 1950. And the arrow in the lower left-hand corner is where the farmhouse is that I showed you earlier. And then the arrow up here on the right is the mansion, the Georgian mansion that I showed you just now. So you can see that it's basically just farm fields and orchards surrounding the two properties. So she had this great area to create her gardens throughout. The only existing formal garden that predates Polly's work on the property is right here, and this is known as the front garden, and it was created in 1900 to marry the Georgian mansion to the 1865 carriage barn. I didn't mention the mansion was built in 1794. Now this garden in its heyday was absolutely stunning. It was influenced by Ellen Biddle Shipman's work because Ellen Biddle Shipman was a friend of Polly's aunt. But it basically was a big garden room surrounded by double hedges and including these big wooden doors, and it focused on mostly spring blooming plants. But you can see in its heyday that it was absolutely stunning with its variety of taxus topiaries as well. So Polly, I mentioned, was interested in propagation, and this is a picture of Polly when she's quite young. And as a New Englander often does, she liked to appropriate things for her particular use. So this is outside her hen house, but ultimately the hen house became her mist house that she used for all of her propagation work. So you can see that's a little hen house room right here, and then she added on this mist house here that we still use today for propagation. Only problem is the ceiling is really low, so when I'm in there working, I have to bend over, and when I leave the building, my neck is quite sore from working in there. So Polly worked for 40 years propagating plant material, and after things were rooted in the mist house, she would bring them out and she would plant them in these what she called the lattice nurseries in the lower right-hand corner. And then once the plants had been in the lattice nurseries for a few years, she would move them out into her landscape. Now you can see this is a picture of Polly when she was older, and this is a huge Coosa dogwood, which is Polly's specialty. However, she did end up giving a lot of plants away or selling them, and she would dig plants that were actually really big, like this big Coosa here. And a lot of those plants ended up at the public garden, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So here's a picture of the estate from, I think this photo dates to around 1980 to 82. And you can see the transformation of one woman's passion for plants over a 40-year period. So you can see this is the Georgian mansion over here on the right, the original formal garden, but then you can see Polly's mist house and also many pit houses where she did her propagation. But all of the gardens below the mansion house were where she focused the formal gardens where she used Coosas and conifers. And I'll show some more pictures of that. And then beyond that, these are all of her nurseries that she created. So this was her testing grounds for a lot of the plant material that she was working with at the time. She also added this large holding pond, which was quite innovative because the property has a lot of issues with hydrology, and she figured out if she would add the holding pond here, there would be less impact on all of her plants below that area. And it proves true today as we have big issues with hydrology on the property. So I mentioned that Polly's main interest was Coosa dogwoods, and she ended up patenting 7 different cultivars. And she was interested in patenting Coosas that not only had beautifully shaped bracts, offered a lot of different colors, but she was looking for Coosas with very unique bark, and also Coosas that were very drought tolerant and winter hardy. And she was very successful in both of those categories. So she used the Coosa dogwoods to create basically the foundation of her landscape design. She created alleys with the Coosas, and then she also had a lot in the nurseries. But she also used a lot of conifers as well. And the way that Polly used conifers was to create intimate garden spaces within the larger garden. So you can see these incredible taxus hedges that she had cut into a wave pattern. And within the taxus hedges were her garden rooms. And the garden rooms each had a different theme and showed many aspects of Polly's interest in folly in garden, and also the idea of Japanese design, of which she was very interested in as well. We also have great specimen conifers, and Polly loved trees with unique bark, hence her interest in Cusos. But we have this outstanding lacebark pine, Pinus bungiana, and it's the largest Pinus bungiana I've seen in the Northeast. Please write in the chat if you can challenge that. But it's an incredible plant that you don't see in the landscape, and I think it's because they don't handle the snow load. It's certainly very comfortable with the cold, but the snow load is problematic for this incredible specimen. So I mentioned that Polly was interested in dwarf conifers. So she decided to create, she was always experimenting with plants, and she decided to create her own witch's broom garden, which was what she named this garden. And she planted a variety of conifers that were dwarfs, and she propagated these with alfortum at the Arnold Arboretum. And some of you may know that alfortum was one of the preeminent conifer specialists, and particularly focusing on an interest in dwarf and witch's brooms conifers, creating conifers from them. So she planted this garden, and we think it was planted around 1989. And then this is what it looks like a couple of years later. Now, the thing that's interesting about Polly is that she was amazing. We have an amazing collection of photographs, but we have very little written records of our collection, which is problematic to a certain degree. But it's always fun to comb through the photographs and come up with interesting connections between the photographs. And as you can see, the dogs in each photo, because they tell us a lot about the age of the photographs if they're not dated. But so that was the dragon garden and the witch's broom garden. And then this is it a few years later, and this is what it looks like now. So it's very different. Most of the conifers are either reverted, they got shaded out and died, or they just did not do very well in this setting. There are a few exceptions in the garden, but mostly the Japanese maples took over the space. So it's good to have that photographic record of what her intention was when she originally planted it. Polly also, because she was connected to the Arnold, was able to receive as a wedding present, she married late in 1954, and she received 4 seeds for the Metasequoia glypstroboides. And it's very possible that they were some of the earliest seeds from the rediscovered Dawn redwood in China, and because that was rediscovered by a UC Berkeley botanist and a Harvard University botanist in 1950. Here's a picture from above, and so they're really important anchors in our landscape, the Dawn redwoods, and you can see there's also a massive ginkgo right next to it. It's a female. And so they're a great part of our collection, and the trunks of these trees are just spectacular to look at. Here you can see further above. So Polly's idea was to create this, what she called the rolling lawn, and she called it the rolling lawn because that's where the dogs would roll. But she wanted to have a big green space where she could host garden events at her property. And the Dawn redwoods and the ginkgo are the anchors in that collection. She also planted other species of conifers, but as I mentioned before, she liked to test the limits of plants. So she would often plant them very close together. And so this is actually 5 trees planted right next to each other. So we've just left them because if we remove one, they will completely lose the effect. And they seem perfectly healthy, but it's an interesting way of presenting plant material. So one great thing is that, as I mentioned, she propagated all of her plant material from the Arnold. And around 1995, Polly wanted to document those a lot of those cuttings that she collected. So she persuaded folks at the ARB to come out and help her with creating tags for some of her plants. And we still find tags on the trees that we didn't know were there, because a lot of them have actually grown into the trees themselves. But here's an example of one of the tags on the left, and then this beautiful, the moss false cypress on the right that the tag came from. So I just want to talk a little bit about how Polly used conifers in her landscape beyond the formal gardens. So by 1985, the area around the estate had become much more developed. So you can see there's a large Montessori school up here on the upper right corner, and there's a large retirement village across the street. But most impactful to the Wakefield is Brush Hill Road, which is a very, very busy and heavily trafficked road. And you can see it runs right in front of the mansion house and by the gardens. So what Polly did was she started using conifers as fences or screens to create a feeling of intimacy in the landscape itself. So she used a lot of red cedar. You can see here some large arborvitae that block out a mansion below the estate, and a lot of spruce, hemlock, and pine as well. But they're really effective in creating this feeling of quietude and peace when you enter the driveway of the estate. So I think it was a well thought out plan. She bought most of we do have records, she bought most of the conifers. She did not propagate them, for about 5 cents each, which is kind of mind blowing when you see how big they are. But it's an effective use of conifers in the landscape. And finally, I mentioned that Polly was very involved. She started Friends of the Public Garden. The public garden was in disrepair for about 20 years. And they ultimately helped transform it into what it is today. And so a lot of Polly's conifers that she had propagated are in the public garden. So whenever I go through there, I always look and say, oh, this probably came from Wakefield. It's pretty cool. So Polly passed away in 2004, and she created a trust. And she didn't want to be part of any other organization. So she formed her own trust, and she wanted people to come and engage with the land. That was her mission, and that was her hope. And I wanted to include this photo. The photo on the left is Polly gardening. She was very involved and active in garden work beyond propagation. She always gardened in a dress, and she's using the orchard ladder that I still use today. It's an old wooden one, and it's a little heavy, but I still like using it, because I like to think that, Polly would be happy that I'm using her old propagation ladder. So she left the property to be used for community engagement. But at the end of her life, and before the trust was formed, the property went into a period of decline. So some of the buildings needed a lot of work. You can see this is the old mist house, looking sad and degraded quite a bit. But unfortunately, the biggest impact was in the landscape. So after Polly's death, as you know, there's a lot of deer in this area, because we do live in this, the estate is in this big ecosystem, lots of open land. So we have a lot of deer, and the majority of the understory, especially the conifers, were heavily deer browsed. So this was a big issue to think about going forward. You can see this is the garden in the front. The deer have pretty much eaten everything, and a lot of the trees and shrubs are in really rough shape. So I started at the Wakefield in 2012, and I was given the task of writing a landscape management plan and a rehabilitation plan for the gardens. But the first thing we decided that we had to do, if we were going to go forward, to protect the incredible bones of the property, but also if we're going to add any new plant material, was to put in a deer fence. So we added a deer fence, which is covers about 7 acres of the property. And as soon as we added the deer fence, within the first spring after the transformation was absolutely amazing. All spring ephemerals we had never seen before began coming up again. The hedges began to fill in. I mean, it was an instant transformation. So I feel like it was a really it was a hard decision because a historic property that all of a sudden has this large fence around it, it can be quite imposing, but it was also important to do that to rehabilitate this amazing collection. And then we began slowly working away, rehabilitating all the gardens. We were 4, now we're a staff of 3. And we do everything ourselves. So it's a slow process, but at the same time, it's kind of great to do it this way because we try to keep the original intent in mind of what Polly was creating when she built the gardens. So this is the garden today. These are the hedges. We added all new yew hedges. It was a big undertaking, but they're slowly growing back, and you can see that they don't get as much sun as the original hedges, so they're going to grow more slowly. But that's okay because the bones of the garden create a much more interesting character. But then there was the issue of the back of the house. So this is the mansion. It's a prominent part of the garden. It's called the Piazza Lawn. So it was a great opportunity to take an underutilized space, which was difficult to work with because it has a steep grade from behind the mansion down to the lawn. And it had a Stephanander growing there, which is not a pretty plant particularly. So we decided that we were going to create a new conifer garden here. There were on the left side a few dwarf conifers. So there were some intent of dwarf conifers here. So the mansion house was renovated and they did an absolutely beautiful job. And so it was our opportunity to take the next step. So we removed just one tree, this massive Norway maple here, which was in decline anyway, and it had completely decimated the masonry of the steps that go up right in front of it. You can also see in this image that there are quite a few yews here that we ended up renovating and not ripping out, and they've bounced back quite well. So we began by fixing the masonry and adding new stairs, and then I started looking around for dwarf conifers, and this became my obsession, and it's been my obsession since then. So this is the first step. Here it is, the first year of planting. And then this is what it looks like now. So it's coming along really beautifully. But the reason that we wanted to focus on conifers and dwarf and semi-dwarf conifers is because we live, or many of our visitors are from Boston, very urban place. Many of them have very small garden spaces to work with. So this was an opportunity to show people that you could have a wide array of conifers that have incredible texture and color, and they just add so much to the landscape year round, because anybody that lives in New England knows we have not a lot of color in the wintertime. And it's so great to look at this garden all year round because of the great colors and textures. So we added a lot of different species. I tried to choose things that will stay quite small, but some things are going to outgrow that space, but that's okay. And it's just great in the wintertime because they add such quirky elements to the garden. So any winter visitors that come are always so excited because they look so wacky sticking out of the snow. But the thing that's great is, because I've become a member of the Conifer Society, I've started going to the conferences. And not only have I met a group of incredible people and conifer enthusiasts that are so excited to share their knowledge, but I started to become involved in the auction. And what I love about the auction is that a lot of this plant material has been grown by Conifer Society members doing their thing. And I just think it's fantastic. And because we're a reference garden for the American Conifer Society, we were able to get a grant. So I've been able to buy more conifers. So this is the next rendition. It's on the other side of the mansion house. So these are all the conifers that I got at the auction. And right now they're under about a foot of snow, but I have no doubt they will be fine and they'll bounce right back and we will see them again. So the next area that we're going to focus on with a new conifer garden is the front entrance to the mansion house. This area has never really had a lot of focus as far as adding new plant material. But as an arboretum, we feel like it's an underused area, and it's an area that has a lot of ability to show off a lot of great conifers. The other reason we want to focus is on this area is this happened March last year, right at the beginning of the pandemic. We had some hemlocks that predated the Civil War, and they came down in a huge windstorm and narrowly missed hitting the mansion. But it's created a large open space right in front of the mansion. So we feel like it's a great opportunity to plant a lot of different new conifers there. So that's where we're working on. So I just want to talk a few minutes about in our interpretive information and some of our programming. So what's great about our grant money is we were able to purchase labels for the garden and develop interpretive signage. I mentioned that there's only 3 of us here, so we have a lot of people walking around the property, and there's not a lot of people telling them about the plant material. So any opportunity we have to do interpretation, it's hugely helpful for our visitors. We also developed a brochure that helps people understand how big a lot of the conifers will get, because it's a little bit hard to understand that some of them are going to stay that small, and then some of them aren't. They're going to get quite large. So some of the things that we do beyond the garden itself is we've started a research quarterly, and each issue focuses on different aspects of our educational programming or some of our horticultural experimentation. And it's been a great opportunity to delve deeper into our plant collections and our educational programming. So we've managed to come along quite far. We are a certified arboretum. We're on the National Register of Historic Places, and we are a reference garden for the American Conifer Society. We've had some articles published in the Conifer Quarterly, which I have to say is one of my favorite magazines ever. But one thing that I really like about being a member of the Conifer Society, especially because I'm the reference garden chair, I make a few calls and people are always very happy to show me around their gardens. So I've had the opportunity to go to a lot of gardens in the United States, and hopefully after this, we get through the pandemic, I'll be able to visit gardens around the world. But this is the Oregon Garden in Oregon. And then I'm sure many of you have seen this. This is Isley Nursery in Boring, Oregon. And this was as a conifers, newly converted conifer crazed person. I had a 3-hour private tour of Isley, driving around the entire property, seeing everything from the grafting operation to the propagation house to the cutting house. I mean, it was such an incredible experience. And when I walked in the mist house, I had a feeling that Polly Wakefield might have been completely blown away if she had seen this incredible propagation room. It's so fantastic to go in this place. I mean, I hope you all have an opportunity to go there. And then the other thing we've gotten to do is we've gotten to do many conifer related programs. And this is Christy Dustman and Elmer Dustman giving a very well attended class on pruning. And it's been, anytime we have an event associated with the Conifer Society, we have a great turnout of enthusiastic folks. And this is me with those U's I talked about with another group of conifer enthusiasts. And I love this picture. We also do some things like bonsai workshops, and here they're doing dawn redwood. We also run programs for teens. These are horticultural interns doing the favorite job, which is pruning the taxus hedge between the deer fence and the hedge itself, because there's not a lot of space. And then this is one of my favorite is every Christmas time, and we did do it during the pandemic. We just did make your own wreath at home pickup packages. A lot of master gardeners come, and we go out and we very carefully prune some of the conifers. And so all of the plant material in our wreath making workshop comes from the Wakefield. And if you start looking at the plant material, it's kind of mind blowing, from Chamaecyparis cones to just I mean, it's really exciting to see when all these wreaths are made out of plant material from Wakefield. But most importantly is we do programming for kids. We do programming for kids K-5, Boston Public Schools. 2,000 school kids come out every year as part of their environmental ed. And it's a great feeling, and I hope that we can have the kids back soon because I really miss them. We also do phenological research with middle schoolers, which is quite amazing. They're pretty great at it. And then finally, we do programming. This is Connecticut College students collecting plant samples to do DNA testing with. So we do a lot of educational programming here, and it's the best part of what we do. And with that, I'm going to end and say thank you very much for attending. And I hope that you have some questions, because I'm very excited to hear them and try to answer them for you.
If anyone has questions, if you can press the chat button at the bottom of your screen and type in your question, that would be great. Right now we have one question, Debbie, talking a bit more about your research with the dogwoods, trying to figure out which ones were the ones that she had patented.
Yeah, so Polly Wakefield patented 7 cultivars, but she never, unfortunately, she never labeled which of the trees on the property were the patented cultivar varieties. So that left us with a pretty big conundrum. So we decided, I have a friend who's a biology professor at Connecticut College, and she thought that would be a great program for her kids. So what we did, we actually had to go out into the trade and buy Polly's cultivars so we could do the DNA match against those cultivars. And I was able to get some of her trees in the trade, and then the other cultivars I was able to contact several arboretums, and they sent me twig samples so they could do comparison of the twig samples from their collection of Polly's cultivars with ours, and we ended up matching 3 trees. So that was pretty exciting, considering we have more than 400 cousas on the property. But we knew that they each had certain characteristics, so we had narrowed the field down to about 25 before we actually had before we actually started doing the testing. And then once we were able to get the matches, then the propagator at the Arnold Arboretum agreed to propagate them in their much more sophisticated facility. So they propagated our cultivars for us this year. So does that answer the question? I think, yeah. And people can also, if you want to unmute yourselves and ask a question, I think we could do it that way if people didn't write questions into the chat.
What are the names of the cultivars?
Greensleeves, Milky Way, really bad at name coming up with them. Greensleeves, Milky Way. I'm sorry, I can't think of the cultivars at the moment.
Someone is interested to know if you're open year round and what your hours are.
Yes, we are open year round. We're a very small staff, so we just ask that you email us. You can do that through wakefieldtrust.org. Or you can just come by Monday through Friday anytime and just stop in. If you come on the weekend, because we're such a small staff, we need some notice to make sure someone's on the property. But yeah, I mean, we've had people walking around, even though we have quite a bit of snow right now, we have people coming. And we are doing programming, so you can look at our website for our programming as well.
Someone says that they've recently moved and are starting a new conifer garden, and they're wondering what's the best source for conifers in Connecticut?
Broken Arrow Nursery is the absolute best. And I've been working with Broken Arrow since I started here in 2012, and they're incredibly helpful and supportive. They give Conifer Society members a discount. And I know there's the other conifer nursery, I think it's O'Brien's, right, Christy?
Yes.
O'Brien's is another great source of conifers, and they are very supportive of the Conifer Society as well.
We have someone that's wanting you to identify the ground cover in your first slide.
The ground cover in my first slide. I don't remember what the ground cover was. Do you know what it was, Christy?
No, I don't remember. I did notice you had some Mayapple in one of them.
Oh, was it with the fence? Sorry. Wow, I had a lot of slides.
You had a lot of slides.
I think I had about 70 slides.
It's kind of a retrospective now.
Yeah. I don't know what ground cover. Oh, Pedicites.
Ah,
Butterbur. Yes, it's people say that it's invasive, but we've never had a problem with it, and I love it because the deer don't eat it, and it's beautiful with conifers and with dogwoods. So Butterbur or Pedicites. Sorry, I should have known that because I look at this slide a lot.
Someone's asking, when deciding to build a deer fence, how did you decide on the construction design? And would you have done it differently now?
Yeah, that's a great question. That was the most difficult thing for us because you could see the property is quite large. We have more than one entrance. We have several entrances to the garden, and the fence is it's big. It's big, and we have large gates to get in. So we made gates that we made sure that the arborist, the bucket truck could get in. So we had to think about that. But we also had to think about ways that people could get onto the property without going through the deer fence. So I think what we ended up doing has worked well, but now we actually are going to expand the deer fence to include a much larger part of the garden because it's been so successful. But it was very difficult. We spent a long time figuring out where to put the fence, because we couldn't put it right at the entrance because you can't have people opening this giant gate all the time. So that is the most important thing you really need to take. If you are going to install a deer fence, you really need to think about how it's going to work.
Thank you. Can you tell us
your
about
annual budget? What is your annual budget, and how do you?
So we are.
How is it supported? How is it
So,
supported?
thank you. So we are Polly created a trust. So we operate on endowments and grants, and then we do events as well. But Polly she really was very clear that she wanted her place preserved. And as you see, we have a lot of buildings which are very expensive to maintain. So she made sure that that we have an endowment that will continue her legacy going forward. Our operating budget, you can look on our website. I'd rather not say it on the recording, but our 990s are there if you would like to see that. We don't have a big operating budget for the garden. Most of our money goes towards maintaining the buildings because they are a huge undertaking. So.
Can you tell us about the Dogwood Days celebration?
Yes. So in normal times, we have a Dogwood Day celebration that lasts almost 2 weeks. It's when the cousas are in full bloom. And as I mentioned, we have more than 400 of them. And we do a lot of events that focus on getting new visitors to the garden. So I actually do a conifer focused event during the Dogwood Days tours. We do wine, cheese, and trees. We have kid focused events. And all of that information is on our website. We're trying to figure out how to do our Dogwood Day celebration this year with COVID. What we're focusing on is doing very small events where people have to reserve for 3 hours in the garden and then can just spend time. But we should have that worked out in a couple of weeks.
Someone is saying that pedicitis has been invasive for them, but they're suggesting that you can cut and cook it. It's
Yes.
from Japan, so you can look up recipes for Fuki, Fuki.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
It's a stoloniferous plant, so I haven't seen it spread. So, you just keep hacking it back. Sorry, go ahead, Christy.
Someone's wondering about recommendations for deer-proof, fast-growing privacy hedge. Sounds like magic.
Yeah, that's magic. Yeah, arborvitaes are not deer proof. They're fat. The Leland cypress is fast growing. It's not one of my favorite, but it is a fast growing deer tolerant plant. Spruces are deer tolerant, but they don't grow that fast. It's a tough one, deer are tough.
Yeah. Are there any strong favorites among all the dwarf conifers that you chose? So what are your favorites?
Oh,
Like picking children.
Yeah, it is. I think what I like about the conifer garden the best is the way it's grouped together. And then what happens in the spring when they put out the new growth, and you're completely surprised. Like the Abies pinsapo is one of my favorite because it gets those bright yellow little balls on the end. It's so beautiful. But I'm also a big fan of bald cypress. So the dwarf bald cypress is just stunning to me. And one I have right now is just covered in icicles, so I hope it makes it. We'll see. It's hard to choose, you're right. But I like them as groupings the best. So.
Someone's recommending green giant western red arborvitaes. Our wonderful screening conifers grow 3 to 4 feet a year, more deer-proof than regular arbs.
That is true. And some people have mentioned that the deer don't even touch them, which is amazing. So that is true.
And nursery recommendations for larger conifers in Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island.
Sylvan is quite good in Weston. Beyond that, Broken Arrow has large conifers. They have it all. Christy, do you have any other recommendations in the area for large conifers?
I'm thinking, and I'll put a couple in the chat.
Okay.
Any other questions that are on people's minds about conifers? Or about if you are involved? Maybe you could just talk for a minute about if someone is involved with a public garden and is interested in becoming a reference garden, what would they do?
Yes, so we are always looking for more gardens to become reference gardens for the American Conifer Society. The idea is that you have to have a certain number of conifer species in your garden. You have to be open to the public a certain amount. But if you go on the Conifer Society website, there's a whole page of how to become a reference garden for the American Conifer Society. It doesn't cost anything, and you can only benefit because there's opportunities to apply for grant money. But mostly what it's done for the Wakefield is it's brought in a whole new group of visitors, which we are always appreciative of, being a rather new public garden. I also want to say that it would be great if people want to sign on and see the rest of this series, because National is looking at our series as an opportunity to do this nationally. So if our series is successful and people like it and they feel like they've learned something about gardens that they might not otherwise visit, National is going to start running many more programs like this, even when we can go out and visit other gardens. So it is a great opportunity to see places that you might not get to otherwise.
Someone's asking if you fertilize regularly.
We do no fertilizing. We compost all of our own material, all of our leaves. We compost everything. We make only our own mulch now. We don't bring mulch in. And I just do a lot of mulching and leaf compost. No fertilizing.
Not exactly sure about this one message, but someone's saying that they've already signed up. The Wakefield, this one today is the first of the series, correct?
Yes, Wakefield is the first, and then the other series you sign up individually for, even though they all go to the same website. So yes. And they're selling out. So if you're interested in joining, you should sign up. Yeah. Is that it, Christy, or any other questions?
I think that's it. I don't have any other, oh, one more. Nope, someone is saying thank you.
Ah, okay. Well, I thank everyone very much for attending, and I hope you enjoyed this session. And hopefully we'll be able to see each other in real time in 3D soon. And so be well and take care, everyone.
Thank you very much, Debbie. It was very inspirational.
And
Thanks.
thank you, Christy, for co-hosting.
Bye, everybody.